very important and a pertinent question, especially for the masses to understand that what is the difference between the Chinese economy or the Western economies, or in other words, we call the capitalist economies per se. There are many points, but I think the most important one and the foremost one, according to me, is that the Chinese economy is called the state-led development. Especially the Chinese state-owned enterprises are controlled by the state. Now, what do we mean by this? This simply means that their Chinese government is directing resources, they're creating the planning and development of the state-owned enterprises, and they also control the strategic industries through the state-owned enterprises. For example, now the Chinese economy and their state-owned enterprises are working on the advanced manufacturing. They're working on the high-tech industries. Whereas the Western economies, they mostly rely on the market forces, and they are mostly the private enterprises, but there is not much input from the government. So they work privately, and that's how they're growing their economies. So I think this is the main difference. Another important point is the Chinese opening up reforms, or in other words, we call it the incremental reforms or the gradual reforms. As you know, that the Chinese economic miracle started from the Deng Xiaoping in 1979, when he initiated the reforms, and then China opened its doors to the rest of the world. But with the focus of the incremental or the gradual reforms with little experimentation first, this created two important objectives for the Chinese government. One, that there was no social disruption because of this experimentation. And the second one was that it was a controlled experimentation. For example, in certain areas in China, when they initiated reforms, where they succeeded and sometimes they didn't succeed. But the Chinese government very wisely changed their policies accordingly. The best example, I would say, is the Shenzhen. From a small fishing town to a high-tech industry or economy through the special economic zone is one of the best examples. And then I think they started from the agriculture, they moved on to industrial development, and then they introduced and opened up gradually nationwide. I think this is very important for the in terms of the context of Chinese development. Whereas the Western economies, we see that especially in the era of post-1980s, we see that they had introduced liberalization with imminent and immediate policy reforms, for example, like deregulation. But it created a kind of shock waves, especially for the economies which were transitioning from one phase to another. Third important point, I would say, is the socialist market economy. Now, Chinese economy with a hybrid model is called the socialist market economy. What it means is that still there is a purview of the government, but with a broader socialist framework, which is completely different from the capitalist economies. The Chinese state-owned enterprises, for example, they are working on the energy, sustainable energy development. They're working in the telecommunication. They're moving from and then they're financing in a way which is much more aligned with the Chinese objectives and the government priorities and policies. And it creates two very important objectives for the Chinese government. One, that now they are technologically they are more self-sufficient, and then second is they are more focused on the social stability. Whereas in the capitalist economies, we see that there is an extensive private ownership where there is less role of the government. The only government input is to regulate these private enterprises. Fourth very important point is that the Chinese economy is now focusing on the infrastructure and industrial policy. And I think this is the backbone of the Chinese economy or the Chinese development. Um, China has massively worked on its industrialization, and then they also simultaneously introduced and focused on the infrastructure investments. The best example is the Belt and Road Initiative. It has created connectivity across the regions, across the continents. Belt and Road Initiative is working on the infrastructure development for the developing economies. There is global trade connectivity now, and there is a lot of economic influence which is emanating from China to the rest of the world, especially to the developing world, I would say. The fifth and the last point is also extremely important, which Chinese economy is working now, is the integration of technology and innovation. I think Chinese economy is now moving away, shifting its focus from the agriculture-based economy to much more innovative and high-tech industry. And I think this is going to bring more stability to Chinese economy. And another important point is that the Chinese government is putting a lot of efforts and investments as far as its state investment is concerned, and research and development. Chinese youth is now coming up with a lot of innovations, which was absent previously in the Chinese development or economy. The best example I would say is the leadership of Chinese economy in the 5G technology, and as well as the very important and a pivotal role in the artificial intelligence. So I think these are very few important points in my view, which I think which are very important for the people to understand that what are the major differences between the Chinese economy and the capitalist economy. In Beijing Declaration, it was categorically said and clarified that PLO's responsibility would be how to reconstruct the Gaza and how to end this heinous conflict which is going on there. Their focus would not be how to retaliate or how to antagonize Israel in this conflict. I think this is a very productive strike for a peaceful deal between Israel and Palestine. I think the China stance is a major counterbalance to the US when we talk about the Palestinian conflict. Let me also tell you that Prime Minister Wang Yi came up with a very good solution last year in November with a 5-principle stance to Palestinian conflict, which was lauded and appreciated around the world. China has a very good track record. For example, in March last year, China created a rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. China is known and popular for its soft power diplomacy and focusing further on diplomacy and global coalition amongst different states. I think this is so this is so resonant to the China's different initiatives like the Global Security Initiative, Global Development Initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative for that matter, and Global Civilization Initiative, which commonly termed as sheeplomacy. And I think with this, it has a lot of China's global influence, and there is a ideological competition. On the other side, US is focusing on the rule-based world order, the world order, which has created a lot of ripple effects, a lot of rivalries amongst different states. But on the other hand, China is focusing on its peaceful coexistence, community of shared destiny, and community of shared future. I think in terms of Ukrainian conflict, again, China has good relations with Russia, which is completely opposite to what US has been imposing sanctions on um, on Russia, and then China has been focusing and asking for a global dialogue and diplomacy with regards to Ukraine. Well, of course, both China and the US are the major global economies, as well as they have a very substantial economic interdependence, but global influence as well. So positions of both China and the US creates a shift as far as global strategic interests are concerned, especially with regards to Palestinian conflict as well as the Ukrainian issue. I think there are very few important points to keep in mind when we talk about both countries and their policies. The very first thing is that, of course, there is a strategic rivalry between US and China, but with a lot of economic interdependence. Whereas we see a strategic rivalry in terms of technology, with regards to military power, and as far as the global influence is concerned. Let me give you an example. Like United States has imposed a kind of tariff war against China. And recently, especially US is restricting a lot of semiconductors chip and its technology, and it exports to China, which I think it has a considerable implications on China. But on the other hand, US is rely on the Chinese production and manufacturing for their consumers. So both countries, if they have a strategic rivalry, at the same time, they're economically interdependent on each other. Then, second important point is that of course, there is divergent positions on global conflicts like Palestine and Ukraine. Let me start with Palestine first. For example, the Chinese stance is based on the global diplomacy and dialogue and peaceful coexistence. And China has been supporting the Palestinian people on its two-state solution, which is acceptable to mostly Arabic countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and other countries. They have been backing the Chinese state solution. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is being hailed as the game changer project of the Belt and Road Initiative, the major strategic and economic project of the Belt and Road Initiative, usually called as the heart of the Belt and Road Initiative. Gwadar is being named as the zipper of Eurasia, and sometimes it is being called Gwadar is the sine qua non of CPEC, and CPEC is the sine qua non of Gwadar. The first phase of CPEC, which was initiated from 2015 onwards, were more focused on the energy and infrastructure projects, and to considerable extent the energy issues have been resolved under the different projects of the CPEC. And as far as the connectivity is concerned, the infrastructure projects are concerned, it has considerably improved Pakistan's different infrastructure projects. But I think in the second phase, which started off from 2020 onwards, CPEC will see a transition from, it will see a expansion beyond infrastructure, and we call it as the industrialization or the socio-economic cooperation between China and Pakistan. And let me tell you that Pakistan up until now has not worked on its industrialization. We are still considered an agrarian economy, the most de-industrialized state, not only in South Asia, but in entire Southeast Asia. Even some of the African continents and countries are more connected than this part of the world. So I think it's very important that both countries shall work together how to improve the regional connectivity. Whereas we see that Gwadar can turn out to be a global or regional transshipment hub for Africa, for Middle Eastern countries, for Central Asian countries and beyond. I think there is still a lot of room as far as the regional connectivity is concerned. We are living in an age where sustainable development is part and parcel of any economic activity. And especially Pakistan is undergoing and feeling horrendous implications of the global warming and climate changes, I think some of the projects should be more focused towards the sustainable development, towards the green initiative, towards the blue economy, which is part and parcel of the CPEC projects, is already being underlined, already being planned, and will be implemented in the second phase. Where we talk about a lot of positivities when it comes to CPEC, there are a lot of challenges, and I think both countries have to navigate those challenges and have to leverage opportunities to make CPEC a success story. There are some security threats to CPEC, especially in Balochistan, which in other words we call this is the heart of CPEC because of the huge importance of Gawad. There are some factions which has some opposition going on against Pakistan's government, against Chinese interest and Chinese investment in this part of the world. And there are some regional countries who they are opposing CPEC because they cannot assimilate the development of CPEC, because this will leverage Pakistan's economy and it will strengthen Pakistan's position not only on regional scale but also on global level as well. So I think it's very important that if Pakistan wants to reap the dividends of CPEC in true letter and spirit, I think they have to navigate those challenges and make it a robust cooperation under the ambit of the Belt and Road Initiative and the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative, which was initiated last year by President Xi Jinping. Together, I think Pakistan can reap a lot of benefit.